Main screen turn on. Welcome to my very first video ever, also incidentally recorded on the 1st of May and uploaded on whatever the next Friday will be after I finish editing. It's a game that I played on the GameCube using the Game Boy player, and a game that also has the word 1 in it. It is the Final Fight port for the Game Boy Advance. I'm not afraid to say that I'm no expert at this game, and it has been ages since I last played, so I'm just gonna put the difficulty on the lowest one available, just so I don't get my ass kicked the entire time. There are 3 playable characters in this game: Guy, Cody, and Haggar'd, as well as 2 unlockable ones, alpha versions of the first 2 that were mentioned. My character of choice is the manliest man ever, Haggar'd. I skipped over the beginning cutscene because it is rather boring, but the story in a nutshell is that the Mad Gear Gang doesn't like the fact that the mayor of Metro City, Mike Haggar'd, is trying to eliminate all criminal activity from the city, so they kidnap his daughter Jessica in order to get him to cooperate with them. Haggar'd will have none of that though, so he calls for Cody, Jessica's boyfriend, so they can crack some skull. So this game was made by Capcom, originally released in 1989 for the arcades. But this specific port for the Game Boy Advance was released 12 years later in 2001. This game started out being developed as a sequel to the original Street Fighter game, but they changed it to a beat-em-up to cash in on the success of Double Dragon. This was the 7th game released for the CP system, which is an arcade system board developed by Capcom as well. They used it to make 27 different titles, the most well-known probably being the first 3 versions of Street Fighter 2. The first one for it was Forgotten Worlds, while the last one was Mega Man, the Power Battles. This game has a nod to a different, earlier released and unrelated game, also by Capcom, in the name of the Mad Gear Gang. It is actually named after a game that was called LED Storm outside of Japan. It is apparently a racing game, but I haven't played it, so I don't know too much about it. Now, apparently many of the members of the staff that made this game were fans of the movie Streets of Fire, a 1984 film directed by Walter Hill and co-written by him and Larry Gross. It stars Michael Pare, whom I have honestly never heard of before, as the hero of this movie, Tom Cody, Diana Lane as this character's ex-girlfriend, and Willem Dafoe as the villain. I could go on about this movie, but honestly I've never seen it myself and I'd just be reading facts off of Wikipedia. But the basic plot element and the character Cody were inspired by this movie though, so I might have to check it out at some point. There are dialogue scenes in this game for the boss encounters, and they were actually specifically added to this version of the game. So this is the first boss, called Damned. He is also actually the one who kidnapped Jessica and calls Mike Haggar'd in his office, which you would have seen in the opening scene, but I skipped it. He hails from the Dominican Republic and used to be a drug lord until his operations were discovered and shut down by the local police force. He was imprisoned, but escaped and fled to America, bringing him to Metro City. In his attempt to get his old drug baron title back, he drew the attention of the Mad Gear Gang, who, since they control all crime here, demanded a share of the profits in exchange for a high position within the gang. He accepts and becomes a high-ranking member in the hierarchy, as we see here, with him having control over an amount of goons. Or so the Capcom database wiki tells me. At the very least I know that Damned is in control over Mad Gear's information network, which uses informants from many different government agencies to keep them ahead of the authorities. He is also fond of strawberry sundaes and barbecue ribs. In the canon he was defeated by Cody and left Metro City afterwards to enjoy the tropics. So, as I am currently playing with him, and since it is, as I have officially dubbed it, Haggar'd Friday, it would be a crime not to start out with some trivia about him over the other 2 playables. In a trilogy of games, also made by Capcom, about pro wrestling, consisting of Saturday Night Slam Masters, its updated version, Muscle Bomber Duo, and the third and final one, Ring of Destruction Slam Masters 2, Haggar'd was actually also a playable character. Though they were released after Final Fight, the first one being released 4 years after, if I'm correct. Storyline wise, these games actually take place before this one, before Haggar'd became the mayor of Metro City. A number of sequels have been released for this game: Final Fight 2 in 1993 and Final Fight 3 in 1995, both for the Super NES. A parody game was released on the NES called Mighty Final Fight, which uses chibi versions of the characters. A 3D fighting game was released in arcades in 1999 called Final Fight Revenge. It did have a home version released for it on the Sega Saturn, but this was in Japan only. A 3D sequel of sorts, though it is not canon, was released in 2006 for the PlayStation 2 and Xbox called Final Fight Streetwise. Mike Haggar'd actually has the honor of being a playable character in all these games, and he is the only one to do so. In Final Fight 3 though, he changes his appearance somewhat by having a long ponytail for whatever reason, and he wears shorts there, which is a lot less manly than what he is wearing here. Storyline wise though, I am not completely sure if he actually does anything at all. I know Guy and Cody at least fight alongside each other, since they both canonically defeat some of the bosses, but none such note is made about Haggar'd. So I wonder if he just sits out the entire thing in his office, only calling the other two up to do his dirty work for him. Like a boss. Though then again, he does seem to enjoy cracking skulls, so he was probably there as well. In terms of gameplay, Haggar'd is the strongest but the slowest out of the 3 original playable characters. He uses a lot of grappling and wrestling moves in his repertoire. Now in my opinion, there aren't many things that are more satisfying in a beat 'em up than taking an enemy and using them to hurt other enemies, like for example what Haggar'd does, pile driving them into each other. His weapon of specialization in this game is the steel pipe, being able to swing it faster than the others. He is also 48 years old, so that makes him a bit more badass as well. In this ring, we will actually fight none other than the second boss of this game, Sodom. Interesting thing about this character is that he's a complete Japanophile. He has a kanji on his outfits, which is supposed to mean she, which would translate into death. But he has not written it properly, so it actually has no meaning. And this is a running joke with the character, that he is not as good in the Japanese language as he thinks he is. When you hit him, he drops one of his katanas, and if you pick it up, you can see that it's named either Masamune or Muramasa, which are ancient swords in Japanese folklore. Sodom was actually added as a playable character in Street Fighter Alpha, alongside with Guy. In the canon of this game, he is beaten by Guy, which started his hatred for him, since he was previously undefeated and Guy broke his streak. In the Street Fighter storyline, specifically during the time of Alpha 2, he also fought and tried to recruit E Honda, but he failed in both regards. Perfect, because I am awesome. Sorry, dude. One thing that I think was interesting is that Metro City would later return in the game Captain Commando, though it takes place in 2026, so well in the future, since this game takes place in 1989. It was also produced for the CP system, being the 17th game for it. It is also a beat-em-up, just like this game. I think even using the same engine, though you could play with up to 4 people simultaneously in that one. I love this part. Imagine how extremely powerful you need to be just to smash through a door like that. The character you see me grappling and smashing into the other enemy, Brad here, is called Hollywood, or so his life bar would tell us. Hollywood is actually a nickname which is given to him because he has apparently great singing and dancing talent. Good to know. A certain variation of him also throws Molotov cocktails somewhere later on in the game. And here you can see me using, or at least trying to use, the steel pipe. Every time you get hit, you drop whatever weapon is in your hand, and I'm kind of sucking at this point, so I'm not really holding on to it all that much. Also love how, judging by the background, we're apparently in a bar back there, and no one even turns to look around at the random violence that's occurring. So the Andor enemy has been one that's been recurring a couple of times already, but here you can see that there's U Andor and F Andor. Apparently these stand for uncle and father, respectively. I'm not really doing all that well, seeing as this is already my second life that I lost here. What I wanted to do was grab the steel pipe and just smash them into oblivion. But like I said before, kinda sucking at this point. I love the body slam attack that I'm doing now, but regretfully I have absolutely no idea how to pull it off. If you'd been paying attention to the names of the generic enemies, you might have noticed a theme going on where their names are based on either bands or artists. The enemy that I just smashed into the ground, Simmons, is based off of Gene Simmons, I guess, a member of Kiss, who is most well known for his stage persona, the Demon, in his extended tongue. But for as far as I can tell, that really has nothing to do with the enemy Sims. And thus we come at the third and the final boss that I'm showing in this video, Eddie E. I think this is probably one of the more interesting boss characters. He uses his connections within the Mad Gear gang to gain information on other rival gangs, and then uses his position as a police officer to arrest them. This furthers his career on the police force and the goals in the Mad Gear gang, so that probably earns him some respect there as well. Guess the money he gets from his second job is more than his meager police salary earns him. In the canon, Eddie was defeated by Cody and would return to an honest living as a non-corrupt police officer after the fall of the Mad Gear gang. His favorite foods are rare steak and southern deep-fried chicken. He also was easier to beat than the previous boss. Second third of the game in the next video.